With the conquest of Plains Indians, the long westward march that had begun with the arrival of the first European settlers more than 200 years earlier was finally over. Already the United States was looking for new worlds to conquer beyond its own national borders.
American factories are making more than the American people can use. American soil is producing more than they can consume. Fate has written our policy for us. The trade of the world must and shall be ours.
As Senator Albert J. Beveridge pointed out so boldly, in order to keep growing, America's booming industrial economy needed new sources of raw materials and new markets. In the decades following the Civil War, the United States would expand its trade, its territories, and its influence.
Give me 50, 40, 30 more years of life, and I will engage to give you the possession of the American continent and control of the world.
Back in 1867, Secretary of State William Seward was ahead of his time. When he arranged for the United States to purchase far-off Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million, Americans were unprepared for new territories and ridiculed the deal as Seward's folly. Congress only approved the purchase because it expected that Canada would also become part of the United States.
The nation pushed next into the Pacific, where it wanted to acquire bases for the booming whaling and sealing industries. The United States' expanding role in the world was motivated by the belief it was serving an important part in improving conditions in what were thought to be less fortunate nations. American missionaries fanned out across Latin America and Asia to Christianize and improve the lives of non-Western peoples. In Hawaii, American missionaries brought schools, medicine, and new farming techniques. Unfortunately, Americans also carried diseases that devastated Hawaii's Polynesian population. American colonists converted the Hawaiian Islands into thriving sugar and pineapple plantations, forcing surviving Hawaiians to work in the cane and pineapple fields. Needing more workers, planters imported cheap labor from China, Japan, and Portugal. In doing so, they created Hawaii's unique multicultural society. The United States also had a growing interest in the affairs of its next-door neighbors in the Caribbean. As the eagle flies, Washington, D.C. is closer to Havana, Cuba than to Houston, Texas. This closeness meant that events in Latin America had a direct impact on American national security. Americans had first established their interest in the region back in 1823, when President Monroe warned Europe against future colonization of the New World. By the late 19th century, American policymakers were using the Monroe Doctrine to insist that European nations respect the sovereignty of Latin American nations. But the European powers paid scant attention to American warnings, for the United States Navy was small and outdated. Concerned about national defense, Congress in 1883 authorized construction of 3 steel-clad warships, the start of a modern, state-of-the-art American Navy.
In the late 19th century, the American Navy became very important because Americans were trying to develop overseas markets. Out of the factories poured more goods than we could consume. So we sought new outlets for all those excess products that our factories produced. And the Navy became the link between continental United States and other parts of the world. And it was a part of our rise in the world as a major nation. We were on our way to becoming the world's most powerful nation. And a nation without a first-class Navy would never be a first-class power.
In 1890, an obscure naval officer by the name of Alfred Mahan published The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, a book in which he argued that all the great nations in history had gained their power through control of the seas. Mahan gave American policymakers a blueprint for both a consistent foreign policy and national greatness. Congress responded by increasing its appropriations for new ships. By 1907, the United States Navy had 16 first-class battleships, 1 second-class ship, and 5 modern armored cruisers. In 20 years, it had risen from the 13th to the 3rd largest navy in the world. And even before the turn of the new century, the nation had an opportunity to test the strength of its great white fleet.